So hello everyone, and welcome to this talk, which will be about ourselves, about Homo sapiens, about our species, and the history of our species from its very first appearance in East Africa about 100 or 200,000 years ago until today, in the 21st century. Really from the Stone Age in which we began until the Silicon Age, which might be the last age of humankind, because as we'll probably talk later maybe in the discussion, we are probably one of the last generations of Homo sapiens. We are one of the last generations of humans on the planet. In 100 years or 200 years, it's likely that humankind will disappear and will be replaced by something completely different. But before discussing this frightening and maybe exciting possibility of the future of our species, I would like first to dedicate the next half an hour to explaining how we arrived here to the 21st century, to the position we find ourselves now as the dominant species, as the dominant power on Earth. This is actually quite a new situation, at least in evolutionary terms. Humans have existed on Earth for about 2.5 million years, but for most of this period, they were insignificant animals. For more than 2 million years that humans existed on Earth, the most important thing to know about them, about our ancestors, is that they were unimportant animals. Their impact on the ecological system, on the world, on other animals and plants and so forth was quite small, not much bigger than the impact of other animals like lions or like wolves or like bees and ants. Today, in contrast, we find ourselves as the dominant force on the planet. And the first question I would like to address is how exactly did we reach from there to here? From being insignificant apes, minding their own business in a corner of Africa with little impact on the rest of the world, to being the dominant force on the planet. Usually, when we ask ourselves this question of the secret of success of our species, we try to look for the answer on the individual level. We want to believe, I want to believe, that there is something special about me personally, individually, about my body or about my brain that makes me, and each one of you also, a much superior creature in comparison to a chimpanzee or to a pig or to a wolf or to any other kind of animal. But the truth is that on the individual level, we are embarrassingly similar to chimpanzees and to other kinds of animals. If you take me and a chimpanzee and place both of us on some lonely island to see who survives better, I would definitely place my bets on the chimpanzee, not on myself. And I guess if they took almost any one of you and placed you on some lonely island together with a chimpanzee, the chimpanzee would do much better. Because the secret of success of our species is not on the individual level. As an individual animal, I'm not superior, I'm not much better, much more powerful or proficient than many other kinds of animals. It's only on the collective level that human beings are very different from all other kinds of animals on the planet. The real secret of success of our species is that we are the only animal, as far as we know, the only animal that can cooperate flexibly in very large numbers. Now, there are other animal species, like the social insects, like the bees, the termites, the ants, that can cooperate in large numbers, thousands, in some cases hundreds of thousands of ants or bees can come together to build a hive or to build an ant colony and cooperate very effectively. But cooperation among the social insects is not flexible. It's very, very rigid. There is basically just one way in which an ant colony or a beehive can function. And if there is a new opportunity or a new danger that the beehive faces, the bees don't know how to reinvent their social and economic system overnight in order to cope better with the new conditions. The bees, for example, cannot execute the queen bee and establish a communist dictatorship of worker bees or a republic of bees. They cannot do it because their cooperation is rigid and dictated by their DNA. Now, there are other animals, like the social mammals, like the wolves, the elephants, the chimpanzees, the dolphins, that can cooperate much more flexibly than ants or bees. However, the social mammals, other than humans, can cooperate only in relatively small numbers. Chimpanzees, for example, they cooperate in very creative ways, in very imaginative ways, and they can change their behavior quite rapidly. But chimpanzees can cooperate only in a few dozen. 100 chimpanzees maybe can cooperate together, but not much more than that. 1,000 or 10,000 chimpanzees can never cooperate effectively because cooperation among the chimpanzees and the wolves and the dolphins and so forth, it is based on intimate knowledge one of the other. If I'm a chimpanzee and you're a chimpanzee and I want to cooperate with you, I need to know you personally. I need to know what kind of chimpanzee are you. Are you a nice chimpanzee? Are you an evil chimpanzee? Can I trust you? If I don't know you personally, how can I cooperate with you? This is why cooperation among most social mammals, like the chimpanzees, is limited to relatively small numbers. Human beings, Homo sapiens, as far as we know, is the only animal on Earth that has managed to combine both the abilities together at the same time. We cooperate very flexibly, even more than the chimpanzees or the wolves or the dolphins, but we still manage to do it in limitless numbers. Millions upon millions of strangers who never met before can come together and create a network of social or economic or political cooperation. And this is a real secret of success. All the big achievements of humankind, whether it's building the pyramids or the Great Wall of China or reaching the moon or splitting the atom, all the big achievements of humankind have not been the work of some individual genius. They have been the work of flexible cooperation between thousands and millions of people over many years. You can even take this lecture, this event right here, as a good example of what I'm talking about. I came here yesterday evening, flying over from Israel. I don't know most of you, almost all of you, here in the hall now listening to me. I don't know the pilot and the crew members of the plane that brought me over here yesterday from Israel. I don't know the people who built this hall or who invented this computer and this camera and this screen that I'm now using in order to convey my ideas. I don't know all the people who wrote the books and the articles that I've read in preparation for this talk. Even though I don't know all these people and they don't know each other, nevertheless, all of us combine efforts to create this event, this intellectual exchange of ideas. This is something that is unique to human beings. No other animal can do it. Chimpanzees, of course, communicate. Chimpanzees, yes, they convey information one to the other. But you will never see a chimpanzee leaving his band, his territory behind, and traveling to the territory of some distant chimpanzee band in order to give them a talk about humans or about elephants or about bananas or any other thing that might interest chimpanzees. Only humans can do such things. Of course, cooperation is not always nice. All the terrible things that humans have been doing for thousands of years, and humans have been doing really terrible things on the planet, both to themselves and to other animals. All the terrible things that humans have been doing are also based on this ability to cooperate flexibly in large numbers. Prisons are a system of cooperation. Slaughterhouses, armies, concentration camps, these are all examples of very sophisticated networks of cooperation that only humans have. Chimpanzees do not have prisons and slaughterhouses and concentration camps. All the bad things and the good things that humans have been doing for thousands of years are based on this ability. Now, if you accept this basic insight that the sapiens' secret of success is our unique ability to cooperate flexibly in large numbers, the next question that immediately comes to the mind is what enables humans, alone of all the animals on the planet, to cooperate so flexibly and so successfully in such large numbers? And the answer that at least I have to offer to you is that the key is the human imagination. We can cooperate successfully in large numbers because we alone, of all the animals, can invent fictional stories, spread them around, and make millions of strangers all believe in exactly the same fiction. Fiction is the key. As long as millions of people all believe in the same fictional story, they all obey the same norms, the same rules, the same laws, and this is what enables even complete strangers to cooperate. And this is very unique to humans. Chimpanzees cannot do it. You can never convince a chimpanzee to give you a banana by promising him that if you give me this banana, after you die, you'll go to chimpanzee heaven, and there you'll receive lots and lots of bananas for your good deeds here on earth, so now give me this banana. No chimpanzee will ever believe such a story and will be willing to give you a banana because he believes in this story. Only humans can believe in such fictional stories, which is why we control the world and not the chimpanzees. Now, it's relatively easy, perhaps, to accept that fictional stories serve as the basis for large-scale cooperation in the religious field. Yes, millions of people come together to build a cathedral, or to build a mosque, or to fight on a crusade or in a jihad, because they all believe in the same stories about God and heaven and hell. This may be acceptable. But what I want to emphasize is that this is not a uniquely religious phenomenon. The same dynamic, the same mechanism underlies human cooperation in all other fields of activity, not only in religion, but also in politics, also in the legal sphere, also in economics. In the political sphere, in the political field, maybe the most important idea or institution of modern politics is the nation and the state. But the nation and the state and the nation-state, they are also fictional stories in our minds, just like God and heaven. They are not an objective reality. A mountain or a river are objective reality. You can see them, you can touch them, you can even smell them. But a nation is not an objective reality. It doesn't exist in the physical world. It exists only in the stories that people imagine and believe. Similarly, in the legal sphere, maybe the most important legal idea of our time is human rights, which today serve as the basis for legal systems, both national and international, in most of the world. Maybe not all the world, but in most of the world. But this idea of human rights, when you look closely at it, you discover that this too, like heaven and God and the nation, this too is only a fictional story that people have invented and convinced themselves to believe. It is not an objective reality. It is not a biological reality. Biologically speaking, humans have organs, they have DNA, they have nerves, and they have neurons and so forth. They don't have rights. Rights are not a biological reality. If you take a Homo sapiens, this ape from East Africa, and cut him open and look inside, what is this ape made of? You will find the heart and the kidneys and the blood and hormones and neurons and DNA and so forth. You won't find any rights. Because the only place rights exist is in the stories that humans invented and spread around. Now, I don't mean to imply that there is something bad about human rights. Stories are good. Without stories, humans cannot cooperate. And human rights are one of the best stories ever invented in history, which enables millions of people to cooperate relatively peacefully and to increase the prosperity and to decrease the suffering around the world. But still, we have to acknowledge the fact that they are a fictional story. They are not an objective reality. Similarly, in the economic field, the major economic players today in the world are corporations. What are these corporations? Again, they are not an objective entity out there in the world like a lion or a chimpanzee. These corporations are what lawyers call legal fictions. They are stories invented and maintained by the powerful wizards which we call lawyers. The only place corporations exist are in the stories that we invent and tell ourselves, but they now dominate the world. And what do these corporations do all day? Mostly, they try to make money. But money, too, is just a story in our own minds, not an objective reality. If you take money, you take a dollar bill, and you look at it, it has no objective value. You cannot eat it, you cannot drink it, you cannot wear it, you can't do anything with it. But then come along these great storytellers, the greatest storytellers of all. Who are the greatest storytellers of all? They are not the winners of the Nobel Prize in Literature. No, they are not the greatest storytellers. The greatest storytellers of all are the bankers, the finance ministers. They are the greatest stories of all. They come to us with this story that, look, you see this green piece of paper? We are telling you that this is worth 10 bananas. And if I believe this story, and you believe this story, if everybody believes this story, it actually works. I can take this worthless piece of paper, go to a complete stranger whom I've never met before in a supermarket or a shop, give him or her this green piece of paper, and get in exchange real bananas that I can actually eat. This is amazing. This is something only humans can do. Chimpanzees cannot do it. Chimpanzees can trade. They can barter. I'll give you a coconut, you'll give me a banana. This can work. But you give me a green piece of paper and you expect to get bananas in return? This will never work with chimpanzees. Only humans can use money in such a way. And in fact, if you look at all the stories that humans have invented throughout history, I think that money is probably the most successful story of all, because it is the only story everybody believes. Not everybody believes in God and heaven. Not everybody believes in the nation. Not everybody believes in human rights. But everybody believes in money, and in the same kind of money. Even if you think about Osama bin Laden or the Islamic State, they hated American politics and American culture and American religion, but they had nothing against American dollars. When the Islamic State in the recent years conquered various cities in Iraq and Syria, they destroyed local institutions, they destroyed archaeological sites and museums and statues and so forth, but when they took the banks, they never burned the money. If they entered a bank, say in Mosul in Iraq, and they found a pile of dollars with pictures of American presidents and with slogans in English praising the United States, they didn't burn them. No, they took it and they used it, because even the Islamic State has faith in this powerful story told by the Federal Reserve of the United States. Now, you may get the impression that telling stories, effective stories, is easy, that it's easy to invent something and convince millions of people to believe in it. But of course, this is not the case. It's very hard to create an effective story like the story of the dollar or like the story of human rights. The difficulty is not in telling the story. The difficulty is in convincing everybody to believe in the same story. Because usually there are many conflicting stories about God or about money or about a nation. How to convince everybody to believe my story and not some other version, some other story? This is the really difficult part, and much of history actually revolves around this question: how to convince millions of strangers all to put their faith in the same imaginary, fictional story. This is not easy, and this has been the cause of many, if not most, of the conflicts in history. People sometimes imagine that we human beings fight for the same reason that other animals like chimpanzees fight. We fight over territory, we fight over food and other resources, but this is not true. With a few exceptions, the vast majority of conflicts in history were not about territory, and they were not about food. They were about fictional stories. If I take the case of my own country of Israel as a good example, so the conflict we have in Israel between Israelis and Palestinians, people think it is about territory. It's not. There is no objective lack of land between the Mediterranean and the Jordan River. There is enough land to build houses and schools and hospitals for all the people who live between the Mediterranean and the Jordan River. Similarly, there is no objective shortage of food in this area of the world. There is enough food to feed everybody. The problem is that there is no story that everybody can accept. You have at least two groups of people, each of them believing in a very different story. They have a very different story in their minds, and they cannot find a common story that they can all identify with and accept. To take an opposite example, if you look at the history of Western Europe, or Europe in general, over the last century, so 100 years ago, Europeans were killing each other by the millions in the First World War. And later on, they had an even worse war in the Second World War. Tens of millions of people died. Today, and in the last few decades, Europe has become one of the most peaceful places, not only on Earth, but ever in the history of the world. What caused this transition from a zone of war to a zone of peace? It wasn't the discovery of more land. 100 years ago, the French and the Germans were fighting supposedly about land. Today they live in peace. Why? Not because they discovered more land and distributed it to the Germans and French, which are now happy because they have more land. No, there is exactly the same amount of land that they had 100 years ago. What made the difference is that over the last decades, the Europeans have managed to construct, to create a new story, the story of Europe, that both Germans and French could accept and identify with. And this is why they turned from a zone of war into a zone of peace. So to conclude this part of the talk, we can say that humans dominate the planet because we are unique in the sense that we live in a dual reality. All other kinds of animals on the planet live in an objective reality. Their reality consists of objective entities like rivers and trees and lions and elephants. This is the reality of a chimpanzee. We humans, we also live in an objective reality. Our reality also consists of trees and rivers and mountains and lions and elephants. But on top of this objective reality, we have constructed over thousands of years a second layer of fictional reality. A reality consisting of fictional entities like nations, like gods, like corporations, like human rights. And the amazing thing is that as history unfolded, the fictional reality became more and more powerful, so that today the most powerful forces on the planet are these fictional entities. Today, the very survival of trees, of animals, of mountains, of rivers, the very survival of these objective entities now depends on the wishes and decisions of fictional entities, like the United States, like the World Bank, even though these entities exist only in our own imagination. So this is the short answer of how our species turned itself from an insignificant ape in Africa into the ruler of the planet. Of course, it's not the whole story. There are other ingredients that were important to our ascent, to our domination of the world. One very important ingredient, of course, is technology, our technological abilities. Just fictions, just stories would not have been enough. Without inventing and using technology, from stone tools to computers and nuclear bombs, we could not have dominated the planet. But what I want to emphasize in this talk, you hear a lot about the importance of technology. This is not something new. What I wanted to emphasize in this talk is the importance of fiction, of the imagination, because even technology is not useful unless it is combined with some sort of common fictional story. Technology by itself, if you don't have mass cooperation between millions of people, you won't have and you won't be able to use sophisticated technology. You cannot invent a computer by yourself, and even if you could, there is not much you can do. If you're the only one who is using a computer, you need masses of people to cooperate together. And in order to have masses of people cooperating, technology is not enough. You need a story. Technology by itself never tells you how to use it and how to connect people together. Trains, the train, you invent a train, that's wonderful, but what to do with this train, the train doesn't tell you what to do with it. With the same kind of technology, for instance, the technology of the Industrial Revolution, trains, steam engines, telephones, radios, cars, television, with the same technology, You could create a communist dictatorship, you could create a fascist regime, and you could create a liberal democracy. There are three very different ways to organize people, to organize human cooperation. And the technology by itself is neutral. The trains don't tell you whether to create a communist dictatorship or a liberal democracy. One other thing we need to take into consideration is that new technologies usually result not only in new opportunities, but also in new problems. And these problems usually cannot be resolved simply by inventing more technology. You usually need new stories in order to resolve them. To give one example, in the 19th century, humankind gained mastery over amazing new powers, the power of the steam engine, of radio, of telegraph, of trains, and so forth. These new technologies destroyed the old system of cooperation, of pre-industrial societies. It destroyed the social system. It destroyed the power of the old elites, like the feudal landlords. And it created new classes of people, like the urban proletariat or like the middle class. And this created immense social problems that you needed to create a new kind of human cooperation which will be relevant, which will be adapted to the new realities of industrial society. All the traditional religions that humans believed before were not up to the task. You could not organize an industrial society on the basis of peasant religions and traditional ideologies. Now, people, of course, tried. The usual reaction to any new wave of technological breakthrough that destabilizes the social and political system, the usual reaction in history is a fundamentalist wave, trying to go back, trying to find some eternal truth that will give security to people's life in a time of rapid change. So you saw this happening in the 19th century, when, as a reaction to the new wave of technological and economic changes that destroyed the old system, one of the first reactions was trying to find some eternal truth in the traditional religions that will solve all these new problems. And you had a wave of fundamentalist religious movements in the 19th century. In Europe, you had Christian fundamentalism as like the movement that was led by Pope Pius IX in the middle of the 19th century, who said that all the answers to all the new problems and questions of the Industrial Revolution are in the Bible. All the answers are there. Similarly, at the same time, in India, as a reaction to the coming of British imperialism and modern industry, you had a wave of Hindu fundamentalist movements that said that all the answers are in the Vedas, in the traditional holy scriptures of Hinduism. Similarly, in the Middle East, you had religious fundamentalist Muslim movements, like the one led by the Mahdi of Sudan, who said that all the answers to all the problems of modern society, modern industrial societies, are in the Quran and in the Sharia law of Islam. In China, you had maybe the greatest, the biggest war of the 19th century. The biggest war of the 19th century was not the Napoleonic War, it was not the American Civil War, it was the Taiping Rebellion in southern China, which began, again, as a reaction to the coming of British imperialism and modern industry and all the changes that they brought to China and destroyed much of the traditional social system. As a reaction, you had this man, Hong Xiuquan, who allegedly, around 1850, had a vision, a religious vision, in which God revealed himself to Hong and told Hong that he, Hong, was the younger brother of Jesus Christ, chosen by God to create the kingdom of heavenly peace on earth in China and to solve all the problems of the new age, the new industrial age. Millions of people followed Hong into the Taiping Rebellion, which lasted for 14 years, and according to the most modest estimates, led to the death of 20 million people until the rebellion was suppressed. Now, most people today in the world don't remember these 19th century fundamentalist movements because they all failed. The answers to the new problems of industrial society could not be found in the old stories of the Bible or the Quran or the Vedas, for the simple reason that the people who invented and created these stories thousands of years ago were familiar with agricultural societies. They were not familiar with the new realities of modern industry. They didn't know anything. The people who wrote the Bible didn't know anything about steam engines, about radios, about trains, about modern economics. Therefore, they didn't really have answers to the new problems of the industrial age. When we look back to the 19th century, if there are visionaries that we do remember for better or for worse today, they are not the Pope or the Mahdi or Hong Xiuquan. You're much more likely to remember Marx and Engels and Lenin. Why do we remember them? Because they really managed to change the world, and they did so because they created completely new stories that were adapted to the new technological and economic realities of the Industrial Revolution. Lenin was once asked to define communism in a single sentence. Define for us, Vladimir, communism in one simple sentence. And Lenin answered, communism? Communism is power to the workers' councils plus electrification of the whole country. There is no communism without electricity, without trains, without radio. You simply cannot construct a communist economy in 16th century Russia or China. You must have the new conditions of the Industrial Revolution. Communism, in a way, was the first techno-religion. What is a techno-religion? A techno-religion is a religion based on faith in technology, not on faith in some god or supernatural power. Techno-religions, like communism, they make all the old promises, will bring peace and prosperity and will bring you to paradise, but here on earth, with the help of technology, not after you die, with the help of some supernatural being. In this sense, communism was the first techno-religion that promised paradise on earth with the help of technology. It wasn't the last, as we'll immediately see. We are now facing a new industrial revolution in the 21st century. If in the 19th century, the industrial revolution was based on the power of steam and oil and radio, and these powers were used in order to produce textiles and food and vehicles and weapons. Now in the 21st century, we are facing a new industrial revolution based on the power of biotechnology and of computer algorithms. And this time, the new powers will not be used merely in order to produce textiles and food and vehicles and weapons. The main products of 21st century industry will be bodies and brains and minds. These are the main products of the 21st century. And the ability that we are acquiring to start engineering and manufacturing bodies and minds and brains will change the world in much more drastic ways than the old industrial revolution of the 19th century. It offers us immense new opportunities, of upgrading humans into superhumans, even into gods. Humans are in the process of acquiring divine abilities. At the same time, it also poses immense new dangers and threats. We may see unprecedented gaps opening between the rich and the poor. If previously all the gaps between people in different societies in history were social and economic and political, in the future, the gaps may be biological. We might have the technology to start upgrading the rich into superhumans and even gods, whereas billions of people will be left behind. Even a greater threat is that artificial intelligence will make all humans, or at least most humans, completely useless. As artificial intelligence outperforms humans in more and more tasks, it's estimated that within the lifetime of most of us here in this room, maybe most of the jobs in the economy will be taken over by artificial intelligence, and humans will become militarily and economically useless and politically powerless. This is maybe the biggest threat facing humankind in the 21st century. As a reaction to these immense changes, which destabilize the old political system, the old social system that we've inherited from the 20th century, we are also facing a growing wave of religious fundamentalism all over the world for the same reason that it happened in the 19th century. Chaos and uncertainty frighten people. And rightly so, it is frightening to live in a situation when nobody has a clue how the world would look like in 20 or 30 years. People want certainty. So they look for certainty by going back to some supposedly eternal truth that never changes, the truth that offered by various traditional religions. But as in the 19th century, so also in the 21st century, it is very unlikely that the new stories that we need in order to reestablish a functioning social system, that these new stories will come from the traditional religions. Like in the 19th century, so also in the 21st century, we probably need completely new kind of thinking, completely new ideologies, completely new stories that are better adapted to the technological and economic realities of the 21st century. Not only Hinduism and Christianity and Islam, not only they don't have answers to the problems of the 21st century, even the modern ideologies that emerged in the 19th and 20th century, like socialism, like liberalism, they too are probably obsolete. The ideologies, the stories that we have created in order to deal with the problems of the world of the Industrial Revolution, a world of steam, of radio, and television, these stories are probably insufficient in order to deal with the problems posed by artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, nanotechnology, and so forth. We need completely new stories, new religions. Where will these new religions emerge from? Most probably not from the Middle East. If you're looking for the new Lenin, for the new Muhammad that will shape the new stories of the 21st century, the Middle East is probably not a good place to look for them. A much better place is probably Silicon Valley. The most interesting place in the world today, from a religious perspective, is Silicon Valley. This is where the new religions of the 21st century will emerge from. Like communism, they too are techno-religions. They make all the old promises of traditional religions, prosperity, happiness, paradise, but here on earth with the help of technology, not after you die with the help of some supernatural being. What exactly are the stories that these new religions are telling us is really the subject of a very different lecture. So I'll finish the talk here, and maybe we can address at least some of these new ideas in the following discussion. Thank you very much. So I really mean it literally. It's not some metaphor for something else. It's meant literally. History began when we invented gods, in the sense that these fictional entities that we invent are the basis for large-scale cooperation, as I explained in the previous talk. 50,000 years ago, when several hundred humans wanted to cooperate together, even though they didn't know each other, the way to organize such kind of cooperation effectively was by inventing some mythical figure, like a big ancestor or some guardian spirit that constitutes or guards an entire tribe. And even though we don't know each other, all these hundreds of people, we all believe that we come from the same ancestor or that we are protected by the same guardian spirit, and therefore we can cooperate. And even today, it may sound very archaic to speak about revered mythical ancestors, but even in the modern capitalist world, these ancestors are still very important. Again, take a dollar bill or $100 bill and look at it. It has the pictures of ancestors. It has these dead American presidents, which were real people, but they have been elevated to the status of some revered ancestor, like Lincoln or George Washington, and they are on the money. And when two Americans meet and they don't know each other, the way that they cooperate is, you believe in Washington, I also believe in Washington, good, we can make business. So even today, this very sophisticated system is still based on these ancestors. And then the second part of history ending with humans becoming gods, this too, it's not a metaphor. I mean this literally, that humans are now acquiring the abilities that were traditionally thought to be divine abilities. For instance, in the book of Genesis in the Bible, God is described creating animals and plants and humans according to his wishes. Now humans are acquiring, with genetic engineering and biotechnology, we are acquiring this ability to engineer and to produce animals and plants and even humans according to our wishes. Similarly, in most mythologies, gods are described as immortal. Humans now are in the process of trying to overcome death and old age and give to themselves, or at least to the rich elite, indefinite lifespans. This is not some crazy notion. Even leading scientists and business people seriously believe in this possibility of overcoming old age and death. 2 years ago, Google established a sub-company called Calico, whose stated aim is to solve death, to solve the problem of death. And they pour billions of dollars into it. Now, I don't think it will happen in the next 10 or 20 years, but in a given 100 or 200 years, I think it's very likely that people, humans, will gain such mastery over the techniques of biotechnology that engineering superhumans and overcoming death will no longer be science fiction, and it will no longer be mythology. It will be reality.
Professor Harari, 谢谢，继续。
想珍藏一把金戏服、五月天阿信亲笔签名 T 恤及夹克吗？8月8日至8月15日，公视网站限时竞标，请立即上公视网站竞标，详情请下专线02-2633-2000-9。
我们一直觉得说科技是很硬的，我觉得那个不是科技本身的问题，也不是说这一些电脑本身的问题，其实主要还是在人的问题。所以互动艺术呢，其实我要走的呢，也是就是说怎么样借这个艺术呢，建立人与人之间的关系。
如果我牵的手是我的团员的手，或者是我牵的手是部落孩子的手，我觉得那个感受会不一
样。公视表演厅拉歌，公视专为50岁以上熟龄朋友规划的乐龄营来喽！如果您喜欢透过拍照和录影来抓住生活中的精彩时刻，公视乐龄营为您规划初阶的平面摄影及进阶的短片创作课程，并提供专人指导及创作体验。课程活泼有趣，名额有限，熟龄朋友千万别错过喽！
康健杂志荣获金鼎奖最佳健康与休闲杂志，题材横跨医疗新知、健康饮食等议题。扭转并不且的未来是一部医疗纪实纪录片，要为更美好的医疗奋战。捐款2500元获赠康健杂志6期及扭转并不且的未来 DVD。详情可扫描 QR Code 公视网站或拨02-2633-2000-9。
迎战里约奥运，中华队参赛资格破纪录，目标3金2银1铜。为打先轰动，史上首支难民代表队选手逆境逐梦。里约奥运奖落谁家？数学作家赖以威用数学算给你看。每周6晚上6点15，青春发言人用你的角度看新闻。
比赛开始，下课花露米全新变身，由你来闯关。野外就是我们的冒险教室，
你再休息一下可以，往前走。
创意就是我们的制胜绝招。更多的任务等你来挑战。下课花露米，Follow me go！
みのなまみのなまま一个人的世界不用担心贫富mi no na ma mi no na ma一个人的世界无半心盼地，出我的人啊，出我的人啊，险险跳起不准，太宽披身薄心骨，归来人啊，归来人啊。只有归乡的路好，爱娘袂担心贫富。
我觉得第一
个想到就美浓山，像我们都自己就自称说我们住在美浓山下，然后就行上行下，我们到美浓山下。他说走上走下不如美浓山下，然后就自己对那个自己故乡的一种依恋啊。美浓山它的海拔才650公尺吧，可是它的变化很多，白天跟晚上感觉也不一样。所以每一次我从外地要回家的时候，搭巴士的时候，我都是向着北边，从县道184进来的时候要向北边，要看着美浓山回来。
打猎的智慧与掠食的运气，与时间赛跑的海洋猎人，与掠食动物共存的自然法则。捕猎与躲藏各有各的心机与活下去的契机。每周六晚上8点，生态全纪录《掠食猎战》就在公共电视。
老人共餐这一环对弱势的家庭的帮助非常的大，由部落的人自己来自立，送热腾腾的餐送到他们的手上，或者是一起在我们的活动中心来吃饭，人跟人之间疏离感就没有了。
在地发生的新闻都在 PeoPo 公民新闻平台。
4年一度众所瞩目的2016里约奥运，公视要你看奥运拿大奖。赶快到 Facebook 公视体育粉丝团按赞，并预测中华队将荣获几面奖牌，就能参加2016里约奥运看公视有奖征答活动。精美的奖品让您心动不如马上行动，赶快到 Facebook 给公视体育粉丝团按个赞吧。
为什么不救救你妹妹？
失去一个女儿的结束，是了解另一个女儿的开始。父女的久别重逢，既掀起了一场意外的家庭风暴。
如果今天死的是我，你也会骂他吗？
北美青年电影节年度影片，公视网络商城《再见女儿》DVD， 细腻描绘两岸家庭伦理，带你看见最真实的爱与包容。
你不听课，再不听我就打电话客诉你。每天来我车上找我麻烦，我是怕你寂寞，要陪你上班。
Hello， 大家好，我是安琪，又到了跟安琪吃晚餐的时间喽。
你要吃饭，你可以在家陪你吃嘛。你干嘛上网找什么人家陪吃饭？停车，停车，停车！
周日晚间11点30分，公视学生剧展，登入晚餐。
在披萨店会看到文明的世界。
台湾这几年来，不管是咧戏剧、有图还是文学，拢跟大稻埕有关系啊。
来我这买五彩哦，总要先92块。
我安尼做是不是受过人心嘛？结果颠倒害到阮后面。
徛伫咧舞台顶，一个故事就是一个人生，我真介意。
周六晚间9点，公视频道《紫色大稻埕》。
您现在收看的是公共电视，透过公共电视，您看到文化，看到艺术，看到更宽广的世界和更好的未来。